You're listening to The Sacred Sofa, a podcast that explores all things theology and therapy. My name is Grace Brown. I'm a registered psychotherapist, certified Canadian counselor, and owner of Journey with Grace Counseling Services.
And I'm Brad Watson, pastor of Nexus Church and author of the book, A Path Called Compelling. Welcome to The Sacred Sofa. Welcome, friends, and welcome, Grace, to another episode of The Sacred Sofa. And Grace, I want to jump right in today. Start by asking you a question.
Okay.
Have you ever gone on a trip or some kind of travel and returned home and something felt different about home to you? Have you ever had that experience, arrived home to find something changed?
I actually have, and I'm thinking of two experiences actually. One, returning to Canada after a 2-week mission service trip to Uganda. So that was
Mm-hmm.
profoundly different, and
Yes.
I knew I was different. And just about every time I come back to Kitchener after visiting my home state of Ohio.
Ah,
Now, I
uh-huh.
know I've been in Canada a long time, but home is home. Like there's just something,
Home is home.
nostalgic, a little sadness when I come back, leaving
Yeah.
my family behind. So,
Yeah.
what about you?
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's interesting because just you saying that reminded me we got the Olympics coming up in a couple
Oh,
months,
geez.
Grace, and this is good. It's going to be trouble, isn't it? It's going to be trouble. I could tell. Oh no, I was thinking of this, Grace, because I came home. We were away Monday night. I came home and something felt different. I couldn't tell what it was. And finally, I figured it out. Our front screen door is really squeaky when it
Mhm.
opens. And for 2 days, I'm like, this thing isn't making noise. I couldn't tell what had happened. Turns out my father-in-law had come over, oiled it so it didn't make noise. But for 2 days, I was like, something's different about home. I couldn't figure it out. It was a small thing, but oh my. The reason it got me thinking about it is because our storyline today
Mhm. Mhm.
is all about this idea of returning home and something has changed. And I think that's a good introduction to the next of the 7 great storylines that we're exploring. So we've done 3. Now we're right in the middle. This is the Voyage and Return plot line. Now, you'll remember from last week, we did the quest plot
Mhm.
line. So there can be
Mhm.
some confusion between these two because they're similar and they're both kind of travel stories, right? Stories
Right.
on the road. But if quest stories like last week are about seeking treasure, Voyage and Return stories are about seeking home, about coming home. So,
Mhm.
hero, the protagonist, leaves the familiar world, enters a strange one, eventually returns transformed, seeing home and themselves differently or for the first time.
Mhm.
T.S. Eliot captures this perfectly in one of his poems where he says, "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all of our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." So
Mhm.
that's the essence of the plot, maybe of faith too, maybe a faith storyline. But have you ever seen the film Castaway, Grace?
I was trying to remember, and I'm actually not sure. And if I have, it's been a long time.
It's been a
So it's
long
been a
time.
long
Okay.
time.
Well, the next time, Grace, you say to yourself, "I'd like my evening to end in a puddle of tears." Go ahead and watch the. You want a sad storyline? This is a sad one, but for those, there might be some who have a cursory idea. Tom Hanks is the lead character. He lives his life by the clock, efficiency, FedEx employee, gets stranded on a deserted island for 4 years. His only companion is his volleyball named Wilson. But when he finally returns home, everything has changed. And the tragedy of it is his fiance has moved on and got married. His
Mm.
job now feel empty. He no longer fits in with the life he once knew. But something for him has shifted, and it's a positive thing. He realizes the beauty and sacredness of simply being alive. So it's
Mhm.
an interesting plot line because not every homecoming is sort of a happily ever after, but
Mhm.
perhaps happiness wasn't the goal. The goal is wisdom and gratitude, the kind that only maybe sometimes comes from leaving home and returning. So
Mhm.
that's my first question for you, Grace, is a lot of times this plot line can play out in our lives when we experience change, big change, or trauma.
Mhm.
So when that happens to someone and then returns to a life that no longer fits,
Hmm.
What does this disorientation do to a person's sense of identity, Grace? Like how can we navigate the ache of coming home as a different person?
Hmm. Well, often a person feels loss and they feel lost. Any change will
Mm,
invoke feelings of grief or feelings of loss. In the book, The Grief Recovery Handbook, which I mentioned before by James and Friedman, they define grief as, quote, the conflicting feelings caused by the end or change in a familiar pattern of behavior, end quote.
mm-hmm.
Once you're on the path of grief, you don't get off, right?
Right.
There's always before the event and then after the event.
Mm,
And that's any form of change will
mm,
invoke those feelings. And along with the feelings of loss, a person can actually feel lost because what they knew before is no longer, and who
mm,
they were in relationship to that person or event no longer exists.
mm-hmm.
And so, some ways to navigate this ache of loss is one, knowing that change will happen because
Mm,
nothing ever stays the same,
right.
and that they or we will be changed in the process.
Mm,
And knowing that this is a natural process of life to be changing, to be evolving, can actually allow it to feel a little less jarring,
mm,
right?
yeah.
I think another way to navigate is to explore what is still familiar. That can
Mm,
feel centering and grounding for folks. And of course, this is a great space for being reconnected to community.
mm,
And community may also include therapy, which can help a person process the conflicting emotions that eventually will arise through this process.
mm-hmm.
Mhm.
That's great, Grace. And I think again comes back to again the nature of the storyline with Voyage and Return is not that home is happily ever after. There can be a lot of mixed emotions that
Mhm.
come along with returning home. Of course, scripture you could see it as one long voyage and return story, right? And there's a lot of
Mhm.
heartache in between. So humanity begins in a garden, departs into exile through the wilderness, slavery, wandering, but it's all sort of pointing and leading in scripture to this homecoming, this idea of coming home again.
Mhm.
The prophets of the Old Testament call it return from exile. Jesus calls it the kingdom of God. In Revelation, the end of the story, it's envisioned right as a renewed creation, Eden restored. But the arc of the story, you could say, is God bringing us home or
Mhm.
calling for us to come home. And it's interesting to me because in faith world, anyway, I don't know about outside of that, but there's a
Mhm.
lot of talk about deconstruction and reconstruction of faith.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's this process, right, where you home what it was, maybe your faith as a child or whatever, you start questioning or wrestling, leaving certain things about that behind. And it can function itself as its own kind of spiritual voyage and return, leaving the faith of our childhood and discovering it again later.
Mhm.
Um, but I see spiritual or faith deconstruction as a kind of voyage, a necessary leaving that eventually makes return possible.
Mhm.
I'm familiar with this in terms of faith life, but I'm curious from a therapist perspective, Grace, are there other areas of life that people might deconstruct as well? And
Mhm.
and what allows a person to do that healthily? How do you return to faith or community or other aspects of life in a healthy way after a voyage, perhaps of disillusionment?
Mhm. I believe one of the roles I am privileged to have, Brad, as a registered psychotherapist, is to actually hold space for folks' deconstruction.
Mm,
People who access therapy, they're actually aware that change is happening or has happened, and they're actually coming to seek support to try to reorient themselves.
mm.
And here's the thing, any life transition, examples childhood to adulthood, which includes the rocky roller coaster ride of puberty, you know, gaining a sibling,
mm,
any form of relationship change, becoming a parent, aging, empty nest season, like all of those life transitions is actually a place for deconstruction and reconstruction.
mm,
And this process is actually an important process for our self-actualization, which we talked about in our earlier episode, to
mhm,
go through change and in doing so, continue to evolve and transform.
mm,
So knowing that the process of transformation can help folks journey in a healthy way, and also having community come along and support them through often the heaviness and uncertainty of change, all of those things can help a person navigate things in a healthy way.
Hmm.
It's important to allow ourselves to be vulnerable with others and those who already are further ahead on the journey, right?
Right.
That can make the journey and voyage of return feel less like a solo adventure.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I was thinking as I was, thinking together this plot line that I think one of my favorite modern voyage and return stories was the TV show Lost, which was very controversial. People hated how it ended or it fell apart, whatever. But there's an interesting connection between that TV show and one of the stories Jesus tells, famous parable of the prodigal son. But in the TV show Lost, beneath all the mystery of monsters, there's really just one core story about how each character has a fractured relationship with their father.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting as you watch it over the seasons, each character is estranged from their father and they got to face that wound before they can move on, before they can truly come home. And so the
Mm-hmm.
island becomes like a purgatory, liminal space where they wrestle with guilt, forgiveness, belonging.
Mm-hmm.
And so the redemption at the end comes not from escape, but from wrestling and reconciling with the wounds and ghosts of their fathers. And I have so many questions around this idea, Grace. I'm hoping you can help me with because it's just prompted all sorts of ideas. Obviously, we all carry probably some wounds from our parents that continue to shape how we relate to love, trust, even God.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious if there's any, again, generally, but if there's any unique wounds we receive specifically from our fathers, because this ties into me. Jesus tells a parable about two children estranged from their father. Are
Mm-hmm.
there differences, generally speaking, how we relate to wounds from our fathers versus mothers? Or is it all just rolled into one big, hey, our early attachments in life influence the way we experience home later in life?
Mm. I would say, in short, yes.
Mm,
There is something psychologically different about the
mm,
roles and expectations of a father or father figure than a mother or mother figure.
mm,
And what I find fascinating is that the role of mother often actually includes roles a father would be expected to have.
mm,
But even if it's received from a mother and not a father, it still feels like a deficit to a child.
mm,
So there is
mm,
something psychologically interesting and different about the expectation and that
mm.
practice. For example, it's universally expected that a father will provide protection. Right.
Right.
So when a father is absent physically or emotionally, it
Mm,
leaves a void that children can take a lifetime in which to heal.
mm,
So there is something fundamentally different. You talked about attachment, and in attachment theory, and attachment is a fancy word for connection.
mm,
In attachment theory, the experiences that are both positive and negative that a child has with its early attachment figures is what we call
mm.
them. So that could be parents and others.
Yeah.
Um, and we have many attachment figures in a lifetime, throughout a lifetime. Those experiences, both positive or negative, can strongly influence a child's view of the world, their
Mm,
view of themselves. We call those attachment wounds or injuries. Now, if healthy attachment figures are not available, these
mm,
misbeliefs that are developed from that experience continue to inform the lens with which a person will see the world, they see
mm.
themselves, and also influences how they navigate the world.
Huh.
And so, in the therapeutic process, it's an important part of exploring the family of origin, any presence of positive attachment figures. That's also really beginning part of the therapeutic journey because it can tell us a lot.
Mm. Yeah, and it's interesting. I like how you dove in there and talked about, the universal idea that the father will provide protection. It's not as if the mother cannot provide protection as
Right.
well, right? But there's sort of these ways. I just
Mm-hmm.
find that all fascinating, the way we sort of categorize
Mm-hmm.
roles and expectations. And so I find it interesting, right? Okay, you got a TV show like that, but for Jesus, his great famous parable of the prodigal son really is the story of two boys, right? It's not just
Mm-hmm.
one, two boys who have some estrangement from their father, have
Mm-hmm.
some maybe ideas, expectations around the father. in short, everybody I think has some idea of the story, but a child demands his inheritance, tells the father, "Hey, I want you dead, give me my money," leaves home, wastes everything, is completely desperate, and decides, okay, I'm either going to eke it out in life or I need to return home. So he's had his
Mhm,
voice,
mhm,
needs to return home. And the shock, or the first shock of the story, is instead of the father being angry, vindictive, demanding justice, punishment, the father runs to meet the boy, embraces
mm,
him, throws a feast. It's a story that sort of flips everything upside down.
mhm,
And it's
mhm,
interesting, the punishment of the rebellion isn't that the father does anything, it's that it was experienced by the prodigal son already when he's feeding pigs and whatnot. And I
mhm,
find that story fascinating. Grace is always waiting for us, ready to run toward us. And
mhm,
I'm
mhm.
curious, in the therapeutic world, I know there's a lot of, we got to talk about self-forgiveness and the shame that keeps people from believing they're worthy of love. What helps someone to begin to believe that unconditional love, divine or human, could actually include them?
Mhm. Very interesting. So while I'm exploring family of origin dynamics and the
Mm,
presence of positive attachment figures and supportive community, I'm also exploring the beliefs or misbeliefs that have come from those early experiences.
mm,
Okay. Um, John and Julie Gottman are relationship coaches, and they have this concept called the 5-to-1 ratio.
okay.
And this works in all relationships. Um, for every one negative experience or encounter we have, we need 5 positive ones to overshadow the one.
Wow. Hmm.
So think about how that can add up in a day.
Yeah. Yeah. No kidding.
and and so when you think about, early childhood experiences, how that's seared into a person's psyche, right?
Mm,
If one's earliest interactions lead a person to believe that they're not worthy of love, it will take multiple experiences of love and acceptance to eliminate that one misbelief, or
mm,
at the very least, mute the volume on the noise of shame and negative self talk and those kind of
mm,
things. And so these positive experiences have to continue to outweigh those negative experiences.
mm. Wow. That, you know what? That actually just turned on a light bulb for me, because you can have one ugly thing happen in traffic, and all of a sudden that can become kind of the locus of your day.
Yes.
Expand that over a lifetime, and my goodness,
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
that is fascinating, and really does go to show just how formative our early years are, if
Yes.
depending on our environment. Now, one of the things we learn from the story is that when we talk about being lost and found, and that had certain connotations for me, growing up in faith communities, is that,
Mm-hmm.
lost was I'm bad and I've done this to myself. But in the context of the prodigal son story, the home that we're trying to return to, the home that we sort of lost is that place of safety where we feel and experience unconditional love. And this is what the
Mm-hmm.
prodigal son returns to. Home, in its
Mm-hmm.
truest sense, is unconditional love. And so the story sort of speaks to the human condition. This is what we're
Mm-hmm.
ultimately looking for. And
Mm-hmm.
yet, this isn't easy, like I feel a sense of home here and safety and security. But even there's these hints, Grace, that there's limits. Like, I have
Mm-hmm.
a community of people that I love and I think they love me. But in the back of your head, oh, if I did these things, that might change that. Even
Mm-hmm.
with our spouse, our partner, our friends. For those of us who had a healthy upbringing, I think the closest we might experience this unconditional love thing is probably as children.
Mm-hmm.
But my question for you, Grace, is, do you think we're all looking for unconditional love in life? And is it even possible to find?
I'll answer the first question first.
Okay, okay.
Yes, absolutely. I do believe we are all looking for unconditional love in life. And we're talking about storylines. I mean, pick a Hallmark movie, the
Mm.
W channel, like
Yes.
Disney, like pick a movie, right?
Mm.
It just tears our heart to know that, a person has messed up and always received. Like that's something I
Mm.
think visceral in all of us. We're all looking for love, acceptance, belonging, and connection, and we're striving to keep it.
Right.
The answer to your Second question
Yeah, can we
is I
find it?
believe that we all hope for unconditional love, but I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's
Mm.
possible to actually
Mm.
give it and receive unconditional love as humans because we're
Hmm.
finite, Brad.
Right, right.
I'm blessed to have a number of people that I also love, right?
Hmm.
But despite all of our best intentions, it's conditional, right?
Hmm.
We all know if someone crosses a line or they've
Hmm.
gone too far.
Hmm.
And I got to be honest, I think that's all we're capable of.
Hmm.
If we could love unconditionally, I believe God's unconditional love would be unnecessary. I
Right.
believe it's the love of the divine. Now,
Mm.
let me be clear, that
Hmm.
doesn't mean we shouldn't be striving.
Right,
We're
right,
not gonna just
right.
throw our hands up and be like,
Mm.
but I think because of our finite humanity, we can't give that.
No, I appreciate you saying that, Grace, because I think, when you wrestle through it, that's what makes the divine story so compelling, actually, is
Mm,
that we're looking for home for unconditional love. It can really, what was it, St. Augustine, right? Our hearts are restless until we find
mm,
our rest in you, God, right? Something like that. This
mm,
idea, we can only find that in the divine. And every relationship here is an echo of that to a certain extent, but we're finite, right? Even still,
mhm.
we have glimpses of that here in our
Yes,
relationships, and
yes.
the prodigal story reminds us home is where you love for who you are, not what you have to give or what you can do. And I
Mm,
find this interesting in the story. The prodigal son, initially, he's got a ton of money, so he's got a
mhm,
lot of
mhm.
friends. It's like, he's got a lot to give, money.
Mm, mhm,
Eventually that runs out, though, and apparently the love of his friends runs out too. He's on his own.
mhm,
And then there's this pig farmer who takes advantage of him. I wouldn't call that love, but a faux sort of love, kind of, hey,
mhm,
I'll accept you when you're giving me something like cheap labor. And I feel like for many of us, there might be this sneaking suspicion in the back of our minds concerning love.
mhm,
Are we simply loved for what we have or what we do?
mhm,
And I wonder if that sense of conditional love, whether love's depending on performance, usefulness, success,
mhm,
if that's the only kind of love we've known, we live afraid that the love we receive will vanish when we fail. So how do we
mhm,
learn grace, the
mhm.
belief, how do we unlearn the belief that love has to be earned? And what are some ways maybe people can start to feel safe enough to believe in a love that doesn't depend on our efforts, what we can achieve or give?
Mhm, mhm. Again, I think it depends on the context, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if it's completely possible.
No, it's great. We're being honest here, Grace. I like it.
So we've established that God's love is unconditional, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And for those of us who journey with folks and have that privilege, we can actually work with people to remove doubt that they have to keep working to earn God's love and acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is where the human piece comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Certain relationships, such as family, we expect a certain amount of love and acceptance. And that's based on connection, certain membership and community, not by what you do. And
Mm-hmm.
but as you mentioned earlier, it has its limits. I think other relations outside of that familial are often more conditional. I
Mm-hmm.
know it's not romantic, but it's real. We want to give to show our love and care, and we want to receive to have that love and care validated. And for me, working with folks, for me, it's more about is this is there an exchange? Because
Mm-hmm.
often people will be giving, 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 and don't realize they're actually not receiving. And that
Mm-hmm.
actually creates more conflict or fractures in a relationship than this idea that the love is conditional. Does that make sense, what I'm
Right.
saying?
No, it doesn't. It's actually, it's flagging some things for me. Like sometimes with family, we expect the unconditional love, and that sort of puts us in this position of, even if it's a toxic relationship with family,
Mm-hmm,
oh, I
mm-hmm,
gotta
mm-hmm,
keep showing up to Thanksgiving and Christmas because that's just what I do, and I gotta keep putting myself in this bad position. It's like, oh,
mm,
that's no. As humans, there is a certain level of give and take here order for it to be healthy.
Yes.
And
Mm-hmm.
and like you said, it might not be romantic, but there's a certain reality
Mm-hmm.
to even outside of familiar, we expect a certain level of respect and dignity from friends and
Mm-hmm.
who we're
Mm-hmm.
married to, whatever. So and I think that's good stuff, Grace, to sort of flag and think through that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also, I want to return, I think, a bit to the parent thing, because I find that fascinating, just because that's how Jesus frames the story. I think
Mm-hmm.
for some of us, our problem isn't just theology, it's our biography, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our first experience of love comes from our parents, presumably, and if that love felt conditional or angry, we absorb that as truth. So,
Mm-hmm.
I like to tell people, their parents were their theology, their
Yes.
theology teacher, right? So even as
Mm-hmm.
adults, we carry that into our spiritual lives, believing maybe God is as harsh to please as our parents were. And yet, when
Mm-hmm.
parents love their children unconditionally, even if that's imperfect, they give a glimpse of what divine love is like. And,
Mm-hmm.
and that's easier, I think, the younger they are, maybe the older they get. But how do our earliest relationships, just coming back to that, shape the way we imagine God? And for those who have internalized harsh or conditional love, what does healing and reimagining in the therapy process look like for that?
Mm-hmm. Before I go there, I was just thinking too about this prodigal son story, and I'll
Mm.
be honest, I have struggled for many years,
Mm.
especially early, in my younger years. I was the older brother. I was
Yeah.
like, "What you mean you throwing a party? Like lashes?" Like I was just like, I
Right.
could not comprehend that. But as
Yes.
I've matured in my faith, and also through my journey in education as a
Mm.
therapist, I realized that my view came from the type of upbringing I had. The
Mm.
upbringing I had was very harsh, very rigid, very rule
Mm-hmm.
oriented.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually translated to my misunderstanding of the divine love, the welcome of God chasing, running
Yeah.
down to allow his son to come home. And so it's interesting. And so we're making that same case as we talk about, in the same way, our earliest relationships not only shape the way we see our parents and the world, it can absolutely shape the way we see God.
Mm-hmm.
And healing can look like the process of healing the parent family wounds, also while helping them see that the limitation of their parents, that's their unhealed places, right?
Mm.
And that
Right.
takes patience and compassion, not lack of accountability, just understanding the framework of
Mm.
the lens with what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this helps them to realize that their unhealthy or hurtful actions of their parents have no bearing on their true value and worth as a person. But
Mm.
that takes a lot of time and unpacking and reframing.
Yeah, yeah, and even as you start explaining that there, Grace, you can see how there's a generational thing here too, that
Yes.
we pass down a lot of the harms handed to us. So all a big process. But in
Mm-hmm.
the end, all voyage and return stories remind us that being lost or feeling lost isn't a failure. It's part of
Mm-hmm.
the journey. And lostness means living without the experience of unconditional love. But no matter how far we wander, like to think of it, the light on God's porch is always on and the door is always unlocked, right? We can always
Mm-hmm.
return
Mm-hmm.
home. For people who, in that metaphor, listeners who might be in this moment going, you know what, I just feel far from home right now, whether it's emotional, spiritual, relationally,
Mm-hmm.
what small steps can we offer them to help them begin the voyage back home?
Mm-hmm. Just like the prodigal son, I think it starts with hope,
Mm.
a small belief that things can be different.
Mm.
And then I think what quickly follows that is the actual desire to return.
Mm.
So to have the faith that hope can be put into action, right?
Mm.
The prodigal, he thought about going home, right? And I don't know how long he was in that pigsty thinking about it, but
Right.
eventually he was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go, right?
Mm.
So there was
Mm-hmm.
something in him that believed that maybe, just maybe, if I go home, things will be different. And lastly, I don't think this can ever be overstated. We've said it many times in our work together, Brad, the
Yeah.
support of safe community.
Mm.
That could look like a
Mm.
spiritual guide, a therapist, friends, family, whoever helps you not feel alone.
Mm. That's a great that's a great word there, and a good reflection, because I was just thinking about the prodigal son. His hope, he gets even more than he hoped for, but he's like,
Mm-hmm.
maybe I can be just my father's servant, like not
Mm-hmm.
even child status, but there's a glimmer of hope there, of a something might be better or different on the horizon. And
Mm-hmm.
hopefully our listeners can walk away today with a glimpse of that. Things can be different and better just over the horizon. So thank you, Grace, as always, for everything you bring and all the questions that you bring a wonderful perspective to. So thanks as always, Grace.
Thanks to you, Brad. And thanks again to our listeners here at the Sacred Sofa. We'll see you next time.
Next time.